I'll do one more example of another question like letter A. I'm choosing letter B just because it's similar. That way we can feel ultimately quite comfortable with the idea of using our new modified infinite geometric series formula. As a reminder, the infinite geometric series formula is a sub 1 over 1 minus r. So to use this formula, I simply need to identify a sub 1, the first term, and r, the multiplier, of the series that I'm trying to work with. So a sub 1 is always the first term in the series. A sub 1 is going to be 1 in example B, because that is literally the first number that they gave us in the series. R is the multiplier of the series. So I'm looking at these terms thinking 1/4 looks like it's a logical multiplier, but I am noticing negative 1/4 then becomes positive 1/16, then becomes negative 1/64. So I'm thinking we're not just multiplying by a fourth, it looks like we're multiplying by negative 1/4. And in case you're like, no, Herbert, that doesn't make sense. What about the plus signs? Like, why are they not all the same? Why isn't it all minus signs? Think logically. If you take 1 times negative 1/4, you get negative 1/4. That is the second term of the series. If you take that second term, negative 1/4, and multiply by the same multiplier of negative 1/4, you do end up with positive 1/16, which is indeed the third term of the series. And if I take that answer, 1/16, and multiply by again the multiplier, negative 1/4, I get negative 1/64, which sure enough does look like it's the fourth term in the series. So it seems as though the multiplier really does have to be negative 1/4 for this to end up working. So I'm going to call R negative 1/4, so that way I can be sure I'm plugging into my formula correctly. Now let's use the formula. The formula is a sub 1, which we said is 1, over 1 minus R, which we said is negative 1/4. Now we'll just have to be a little bit careful with our algebra here just to ensure that we have all these details straight, especially in the denominator. So on the top I just have 1, that's easy. In the denominator I have 1 minus negative 1/4. Minus negative becomes plus, so 1 plus 1/4. And now I need to think for a moment. That's 1 over 1 plus 1/4. If you're not too familiar with fractions, you might want to consider a common denominator. 4/4 plus 1/4, just to reassure yourself that you can do this. But that means in the denominator I have 1 over 4/4 plus 1/4, or 1/4 is 5/4. So now I have 1 over 5/4. Again, a bit of keep, change, flip could be helpful here. 1 times the reciprocal in the denominator would be 4/5, and 1 times 4/5 is 4/5. So my answer, again, can be written as a fraction. And if you panicked, especially if you panicked to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this by hand, I don't even know what to do, there's actually nothing wrong with using your calculator. If you wanted to be really ambitious and be a power user of your calculator, you could type 1 divided by parentheses 1 plus parentheses 1/4. This is why I'm referring to being a power user. You have to know how to put all those individual things in parentheses, and you have to know that you should. But notice that you'll get an answer in your calculator of 0.8. That is the decimal equivalent of the fraction 4/5. So the answer is the same no matter what. Hopefully that justifies to you whichever method you want to use. Whichever way you call your answers, fraction or decimal, it will be correct as long as you're plugging in the correct first term and the correct multiplier. So now that you've seen these examples, I think you should be more than sufficiently prepared to do questions C and D, because those questions are virtually the exact same thing as what we were doing in letters A and B. Letter E is where summation notation or sigma notation begins, and I'll do a separate video explaining those. But for now, assume that A through D is a good stopping point, and once you stop, do letters A through D, and check the answers, make sure that everything makes sense. If everything from A through D is okay, then proceed to the last video for letter E. But if you feel as though letters A through D still aren't working out, don't push it. Keep working through those examples. Those are far more important right now. And only after you finish and understand those examples should you worry about layering in this sigma.